The background for this service is that Jack and I found this month we were saying a lot of goodbyes to a lot of people. So we decided to focus the service this Sunday on poems about goodbye. Poems about goodbye sometimes ask us to think about the word itself, or to contemplate a feeling or a landscape. Some of the poems we're going to read are well known, and we've given you an insert that lists some of them if you want to look them up. But we're also including some poems that are original contributions, original poems, some of which are still in progress. So we are giving you this opportunity to hear both old and new poems on this well-worn, long, there's a long history in poetry, of course, of this theme. So I'll begin with a poem by Naomi Nye, which is a very recent poem, called Adios. It's a good word, rolling off the tongue. No matter what language you were born with, use it. Learn where it begins, the small alphabet of departure, how long it takes to think of it. Then say it, then be heard. Marry it. More than any golden ring, it shines, it shines. Wear it on every finger till your hands dance, touching everything easily, letting everything easily go. Strap it to your back like wings or a kite tail, the stream of air behind a jet. Let it be your way to rise out of sight when your work is finished. Think of things that linger. Leaves, cartons, and napkins, the damp smell of mold. Think of things that disappear. Think of what you love best, what brings tears into your eyes. Something that said adios to you before you knew what it meant or how long it was for. Explain little, the word explains itself. Later, perhaps, lessons following lessons, like silence following sound. Now I'm going to call up Carlton Shepard, who's going to read the next poem by Edna St. Vincent Millay.
I shall go back again to the bleak shore and build a little shanty upon the sand in such a way that the extremest band of brittle seaweed shall escape my door but by a yard or two. And never more shall I return to take you by the hand. I shall be gone to what I understand and happier than I ever was before. The love that stood a moment in your eyes, the words that lay a moment on your tongue, are one with all that in a moment dies, a little undersaid and oversung. But I shall find the sullen rocks and skies unchanged from what they were when I was young.
Have you ever wondered why poets write so often about people who are dying or dead? I think there are lots of reasons. We were surprised that many of the poems that we received, many of the examples that people asked to read, were about mothers or fathers who were no longer alive or cannot hear their words. One reason I think that people write poems about people who are no longer alive is because it provides an opportunity to have a dialogue with that person or to think about their memory when you can't speak directly with them. Jack and I will read the first two examples, then we'll turn the mic over to Mark James, who will read an original poem. And then I'll read an original poem by Skip Barlow, who contacted me 2 days ago with a poem that he would like to have read, and he sends his greetings to everybody here. And then we'll end this sequence with a poem that by Peter Everwine that Jack will read. So first, I'll turn the mic over to Jack.
So this is a poem written by a woman named Sarah Guillot, who happens to be my sister, 20 years ago, on the occasion of our mother's death. It's entitled The Long Goodbye. My mother is fading away as surely as the white, spidery script under pictures in an old family album. As surely as the label on a soap box left too long in the sun in a store window. As surely as the tumbled ochres of these November fields will yield to steady winter grays. For me, this passage time is moving towards a longing for sweet release. Yet now a panic pulse of loss. This hollow space between my outstretched arms is growing, and I grasp and grasp again her melting presence. I pray for energy and memory to fill this space. Tendrils of winding vines hang loose and lost as their old home tree sighs to the ground one silver fog-filled morning.
The next example is by D.H. Lawrence. It's called Piano. Lawrence was 25 when his mother died after an agonizing illness due to cancer. He was teaching in Croydon, south of London, but he came home to Nottingham often during her illness and was present at her death. He was also writing Sons and Lovers at that time, which might give you some background about this poem. But he wrote this poem 8 years after his mother's death, reminding us, I think, of some of the ways that goodbyes linger in the mind. Softly in the dusk, a woman is singing to me, taking me back down the vista of years till I see a child sitting under the piano in the boom of tingling strings and pressing the small, poised feet of a mother who smiles as she sings. In spite of myself, the insidious mastery of song betrays me back till the heart of me weeps to belong to the old Sunday evenings at home with the winter outside and hymns in the cozy parlor, the tinkling of the piano, our guide. So now it's vain for the singer to burst into clamor with the great black piano appassionato. The glamour of childish days is upon me. My manhood is cast down in the blood of remembrance. I weep like a child for the past. Now, Mark, where are you?
To put this in some perspective, this was written about 2.5 years ago, and my father was still living, but it was more just reflecting on some thoughts about him. And one thing to know, so that it makes sense when I say some of these things, is that he liked to tell his tales, as people often do, and he loved having an audience to regale with his stories. And he also was, his favorite book of all time was Ulysses by James Joyce, and he taught a night class at Carnegie Mellon University for about 10 years after he retired. And the class would read the book aloud. They would go from person to person, because it's one that apparently, because I will never read it actually, apparently best read out loud. So there is a reference in here if you catch it. On the occasion of my father's 92nd birthday, we are all constructed of the elements of our family soil, nurtured by earthworm castings that feed the growth of greenery. The mass of putrid compost that we leave in our wake feeds the unimaginable resurrection of ourselves into a beauty that defies hope and imagination, both glorifying and mocking our precious stories. Once upon a time tales are handed down through the generations until they have outlived their clear purpose. And the latest living iteration of evolution recomposes the elements of that story. The origins of the elements may no longer be recognizable, but are the same as fed my father's beautiful and disturbing stories. Those same stories that once fed our eager, open minds. The transformation remains a mystery. We each reclaim and reconfigure from the rich humus of time, from the faded memory of loved ones, from loss to regain to loss again. The transformation is no less miraculous than a sprout coming to full flower on a special bloom's day. And so the shattered sherds of our earthenware icons will once again become the earth, the elements for future reconstruction. This is the archaeological dig into the lineage of character that is revealed by the crucible of time, far older than living this brief 90-something lifespan, extending into the unknowable lives of our emerging family, of our future storytellers, and their mesmerizing imaginings.
This next poem is an ode that Skip Barlow wrote. He was not able to be present at his father's death, and it made him very sad, and it's one of the things that prompted him to write this poem. A day, a life together, dear lover, parent, friend. Then suddenly you left me. Could this be how we end? Sweet memories of sharing life's moments one by one, each step in education. Our journey wasn't done. Compassion, wisdom, patience, they're gone now from my touch. I never planned to do without you, gave me oh so much. I'm left behind to wonder why, just why, you had to go. Will I hear your voice again? This sad heart yearns to know. My comfort is believing your spirit did not die. Forever my companion will never say goodbye. And Jack will finish out this set.
So appropriately, poet Peter Everwine will read his After the Funeral. We opened closets and bureau drawers and packed away in boxes dresses and shoes and silk underthings still wrapped in tissue. We sorted through cedar chests. We gathered and set aside the keepsakes and the good silver and brought up from the coal cellar jars of tomato sauce, peppers, jellied fruit. We dismantled. We took down from the walls. We bundled and carted off and swept clean. Goodbye, goodbye, we said, closing the door behind us, going our separate ways from the house we'd emptied, and which in the coming days we would fill again and empty and try and fill again.
Poets often turn to poetry also when they want to say goodbye to a friend and for some reason are not able to talk to them, or to pets or places they've left behind, places they've loved. The first one is a familiar example, perhaps. It's from Alfred Lord Tennyson's In Memoriam, which is a long series of poems. This is a very short part. It was written on the occasion of his friend Arthur Hallam's death. He died suddenly at 22 years old, and Tennyson was very close with him. I sometimes hold it half a sin to put in words the grief I feel. For words like nature half reveal and half conceal the soul within. But for the unquiet hour and brain, a use in measured language lies. The sad mechanic exercise like dull narcotics, numbing pain. In words like weeds, I'll wrap me o'er like coarsest clothes against the cold. But that large grief which these enfold is given in outline and no more. The next poem is a more modern one, and this is by Mark Vince, contemporary American poet. It's called The Way We Say Goodbye. So many years later, the old dog still circles, head lowered, crippled by arthritis, nearly blind, incontinent. We repeat the litany as if we need convincing that the end is right. I'll get her an ice cream cone if you'll drive her to the vet, my wife says. So there we sit on the front steps with our friend. And in the car, as always, when she senses the doctor's office drawing near, she moans and tries to burrow underneath the seats. What remains? The memory of how she taught us all the way we need to learn to live with wasting. There we sit, together, one last time, as all that sweetness slowly disappears.
So let's take a minute to just take a deep breath. What do you say? Breathe in, let your lungs expand, and have a nice exhale. There's actually a nerve they discovered that leads to relaxation through that sort of breathing. And so that's all. Let's take a minute to exhale. We're through with death for this segment, even though death may not be through with us, but for today anyway, we're going to segue. There's many ways to say goodbye. You know, death is one, and we've talked about that, and it's the existential experience, and so it's no wonder that people have written a lot about death. But there's other ways to say goodbye. Graduation. You know, we said goodbye to Michaela when she graduated. As a matter of fact, her mom had a car packed, and off they went right after the service a couple of weeks ago. Gabriel's graduating in December. We'll be saying goodbye to him at that point. Kay and I, as an example, are leaving the area after 24 years, so we'll be saying goodbye over the next couple of weeks. So there are other ways to say goodbye. Our minister has said goodbye to us. So there's a series of things going on here. There's also the saying goodbyes to stages of life and ways of being, ways of acting. And one of the poems I want to share, I always thought was kind of entertaining. It's called An Autobiography in 5 Short Chapters by Portia Nelson. Chapter 1, I walk down the street. There's a deep hole in the sidewalk. I fall in. I'm lost. I'm helpless. It isn't my fault. It takes me forever to find a way out. Chapter 2, I walk down the same street. There's a deep hole in the sidewalk. I pretend I don't see it. I fall in again. I can't believe I'm in the same place, but it isn't my fault. It takes a long time to get out. Chapter 3, I walk down the same street. There is a deep hole in the sidewalk. I see it is there. I still fall in. It's a habit. My eyes are wide open. I know where I am. It is my fault. I get out immediately. Chapter 4. I walk down the same street. There's a deep hole in the sidewalk. I walk around it. Chapter 5. I walk down another street. That may resonate to someone you know. I want to share a poem I wrote recently, and it deals really with changing stages in life and some of the awarenesses that come with that. It's called Let Me Grow Old. Let me grow old, would you? Let me forget more and more each day. Too much has happened to keep recalling. You're old, I know you're thinking. Well, yes. I've taken quite a journey to achieve this age, and I remember my ages before this one. I'm quite happy to be slowing down. Most fortunes and adventures are well behind, just memories. I once disdained the old, my old parents, their ways, their patience and doddering and lack of zest, their naps. I feared ever being like them. And now, I forgive your curt displays of dominance. I forgive your dismissals of my presence creaking along. My graying friends understand, and so I cherish them. So carry on full speed making your way. Win often. I'll show up and cheer in my unfashionable way. My love is deep and wide and can ever hold you.
Our last section refers to losses that mark our spiritual life. Sometimes we have to say goodbye to dreams or ways of being in the world that we have to give up. I'm going to first read a characteristically ironic poem by a British woman poet named Stevie Smith, called In My Dreams. In my dreams, I'm always saying goodbye and riding away. Whither and why, I know not, nor do I care. And the parting is sweet, and the parting over is sweeter. And sweetest of all is the night and the rushing air. In my dreams, they are always waving their hands and saying goodbye. And they give me the stirrup cup, and I smile as I drink. I'm glad the journey is set. I'm glad I'm going. I'm glad that my friends don't know what I think.
So we're going to go through several poems a little bit more complicated, about more complicated and painful goodbyes. And we were thinking about the feelings associated with Reverend Kevin having left our congregation after serving us for 3 years. In the 24 years we've been members here, this is the 7th ministry we've experienced. They've been as little as 6 months and as long as 6 years in the case of Reverend Wendy Williams. So the fact is, and we're experiencing it now, is that ministries come and ministries go, but the congregation remains. I believe that one of the acts of faith for UUs and really in any congregation is the congregation remaining a solid force, continuing on with the work of their ministry and their work in the community. And we're no different. So it's just the nature of churches. It's the nature of institutions. We see people come and go, and nonprofits and our politicians. So let's keep it in perspective. And though learn to say goodbye through this process. I'm going to share a poem by Robert Bly called Snowbanks North of the House. It's one that's always appealed to me. It's kind of a little mysterious thing. And I think I finally realized what he's saying here. He's describing many, many ways that people go through a certain experience. And I think that experience is a loss of faith. So I'm going to pre-interpret it for you a little bit. But Snowbanks North of the House, Robert Bly. Those great sweeps of snow that stop suddenly 6 feet from the house. Thoughts that go so far. The boy gets out of high school and reads no more books. The son stops calling home. The mother puts down her rolling pin and makes no more bread. And the wife looks at her husband one night at a party and loves him no more. The energy leaves the wine, and the minister falls, leaving the church. It will not come closer. The one inside moves back, and the hands touch nothing and are safe. The father grieves for his son and will not leave the room where the coffin stands. He turns away from his wife, and she sleeps alone. And the sea lifts and falls all night, and the moon goes on through the unattached heavens alone. The toe of a shoe pivots in the dust, and the man in the black coat turns and goes back down the hill. No one knows why he came or why he turned away and did not climb the hill.
This next poem is by William Stafford, who was one of Kevin's favorite poets. It's called A Ritual to Read to Each Other. If you don't know the kind of person I am, and I don't know the kind of person you are, a pattern that others made may prevail in the world, and following the wrong God home, we may miss our star. For there is many a small betrayal in the mind, a shrug that lets the fragile sequence break, sending with shouts the horrible errors of childhood storming out to play through the broken dike. And as elephants parade, holding each other's tail, but if one wanders, the circus won't find its park. I call it cruel, and maybe the root of all cruelty, to know what occurs, but not recognize the fact. And so to appeal to a voice, to something shadowy, a remote, important region in all who talk. Though we could fool each other, we should consider, lest the parade of our mutual life gets lost in the dark. For it is important that wake people be awake, or a breaking line may discourage them back to sleep. The signals we give, yes or no, or maybe, should be clear. The darkness around us is deep.
We're going to close the set of poems with a poem by Wendell Berry, who many people know. He's written lots about the natural world in a very effective way. And it's called Ripening. The longer we are together, the larger death grows around us. How many we know by now who are dead? We who were young now count the cost of having been. And yet, as we know the dead, we grow familiar with the world. We who were young and loved each other ignorantly now come to know each other in love, married by what we have done as much as by what we intend. Our hair turns white with our ripening, as though to fly away in some coming wind, bearing the seeds of what we know. It was bitter to learn that we come to death as we come to love, bitter to face the just and solving welcome that death prepares. But that is bitter only to the ignorant who pray it will not happen. Having come the bitter way to better prayer, we have the sweetness of ripening. How sweet to know you by the signs of this world. Gabriel, will you introduce a hymn?
Please rise and body your spirit as we sing hymn number 1012 out of the Teal hymnal, When I Am Frightened.
Should be when I'm uncertain. As you